Boom. All right. Mark told his family that he wanted them to try and get everything they had to have tomorrow. He said he still hoped they still had a few days, but he felt the water situation in his town was getting worse and they couldn't afford to gamble on having more than another day. He asked Sam to give them all an update on their inventory of food. Sam reported that they had 11 weeks worth of everything they needed. Beyond that, they had enough staples to last another 14 weeks now. If 5 people went to the store tomorrow, that should get the staples up to about 9 months worth. Mark thanked Sam for doing such a fine job on the inventory. Then he asked Gunny if there's any way he could go to the store tomorrow. Gunny said he'd given the guards the day off tomorrow after what Mark had said at the meeting. He'd also assigned guards to the gate who'd gone through the gate training already. He also made sure the ones he assigned had wives who could go to the grocery store tomorrow. He told the group that he made a list of the rifles the guards were using and a list of the ammunition each man had. Many of the men had only 20 or 30 rounds for their rifles. Some of them had a little cash and asked if we could pick up some ammo. I told them we would. However, lots of them boys are tapped out, and if we could help them out a little bit, it'd let them use their rifles more, and we can use the ones we bought tonight for ones that don't have any, Gunny said. What do we need, Gunny? Mark asked. Here's a list of the boys who had some money and what they wants. Here's a list of boys that don't have no money and what calibers they shooting. The number next to the caliber is how many rounds they got now. It'd be nice if we could get up to 1,000 for the boys with semi-autos and 300 for the others. I know that's a lot of ammo, but whatever we can do would be good. I still got some silver I can pitch in. Mark looked at the list for a minute. The list of the ones with no money was over twice as long as the list of those who did. He handed them back to Gunny. Well, you'll probably be going to the Watsons tomorrow after the store, so I'll leave it up to you. I can pitch in a little cash and maybe we can get a little if Jerry's got enough. I also got some money from Ted, and he wants us to pick him up an AK, 5 mags, and a couple thousand rounds of ammo. Mark went on to tell the family about Ted selling Susan half interest in his car. It was agreed that Gunny, Abby, Jess, Alice, and Jim would go to one of the Kroger's stores in the morning. Lisa and Mark would try to get the other items they had discussed the night before. With that settled, Mark asked Jess and Sam how the clothes washing had gone. They were able to get several loads done before David and Chaparro had come for the generator. They ended up washing 3 loads by hand. Sam asked her father if he remembered what she had said to him when they bought the wash tubs. He didn't, and asked her to remind him. I said it was going to bite, and boy was I right, she said as she showed her father her scraped knuckles. George asked David how it was going with helping Chaparro. David said they'd finished with the pipes for the fence before lunch, and then they'd started on the tractor hitch for the Jeep. He relayed that Chaparro thought they might be done with it tomorrow night if all went well. He said he'd learned a lot and really enjoyed the work. The formal part of the family meeting over, everyone chatted for a while before they headed home or to bed. On their way out to the camper, Mark asked Jess how much she thought they could donate toward ammo for the guards. She felt they'd already gone above and beyond generosity by buying the SKS rifles and ammo. Mark agreed, but felt they had to help at least a little. In the end, she agreed to them pitching in $300. This night, when he went to bed, he didn't feel quite as good about their preparations as he did the night before, and he was even more worried about how long the money would hold out. They were further along than they had been, but something he couldn't put his finger on was bothering him. Whatever it was, it didn't keep him awake for long. When the alarm went off, Mark decided to sleep a little longer instead of running. He turned the wind-up alarm clock off and went back to sleep. The next thing he knew, David was waking him up to come eat breakfast. And the clock said 7:45. Everyone ate and then headed off to do their jobs for the day. Sam was watching the twins today, and Mark could tell she wasn't thrilled about it, but there was no one else to do it. He would have to find a way to make it up to her. Mark and Lisa took the Jeep. Chaparro had taken all the measurements he needed, and he wouldn't be ready to start welding on it until late this afternoon, at the earliest. Mark and Lisa had no trouble buying the school supplies and most of the clothing on their list. They bought socks, underwear, jeans, and other sturdy clothing for everyone. They had to look quite a few places to find a grain mill, though. They finally found it at a specialty store that mostly catered to what Mark would call health food nuts. It was expensive, almost 400 cash, but the clerk had said it was one of the best made. It was called the Country Living Grain Mill, and it was built like a tank. The search for batteries, though, was still not successful. Mark did find 3 bottles of the shampoo Sam liked, and he bought them for her. Mark and Lisa got home around 2, and after they'd unloaded the Jeep, Mark drove it over to Chaparro's. He told Chaparro and his young apprentice about the people he'd seen walking and biking out of town today. It wasn't a mass exodus, but they were definitely more people leaving than they had seen before. Most were on the highways, and some had tried to thumb a ride with him, but he hadn't stopped. They chatted for a while, and Chaparro showed him the hitch. It was operated with a mechanical high-lift jack instead of a hydraulic pump like the tractor had. When Mark saw Jim's Chevy drive by, he excused himself and went out to the house. Gunny and Jim were unloading the ammo, and they filled Mark in on the events of the day. The water in town had come back on later than it did the day before, and even though it had been turned off earlier. Jim said the people in town were getting really spooked about not only the water, but the lawlessness that was getting worse. The big story at Kroger was how the police had tried to arrest one of the big gangs that was terrorizing a high-dollar neighborhood. The police had brought the SWAT team in case they had trouble, but they hadn't expected the gang would have over 50 members with guns. The firefight was terrible, but the police, with their training and better weapons, were winning until they ran out of ammunition. Then the gang members who were still alive cut them to pieces. The story made them really think about how much ammo they should buy, Gunny said. Even Jess had told the men to spend whatever they thought was prudent, Jim told his friend. They explained they hadn't been able to get much ammo for the hunting rifles chambered in non-military calibers. They needed 30 the most, but were only able to get 360 rounds. That was all the Watsons had. They'd gotten 2 boxes for each rifle in a common caliber, but that was all they could afford of the commercial ammo. Military surplus calibers were a different matter, though. Jerry had lots of it, and he offered the community a discount since they'd bought so much from him lately. Jim and Gunny took advantage of that. Jim and Mark were carrying the ammo into the shed, and Gunny was separating it into stacks. When they had carried the last of the heavy cases into the shed and the old Marine had told them where to stack them, Jim went back to his truck for a minute. He carried in 2 AKs and set them on the counter. "This one is for Ted," Jim explained, "and I got another one." Mark noticed that Jim had used a Glock pistol too. Jim saw him looking at it. "It's for George. He lost his guns in the fire, and Lisa asked me to get him a couple." George was too proud to ask. Lisa's mom told her he felt bad he didn't have any guns, and Lisa told me. "That was nice of you." "Yeah, I guess. Neither of you can tell him how I found out, though. Else I'll have Lisa and her mom mad at me. I just did it on my own, understand?" Gunny just grinned as he mimed turning a key on a lock in his mouth. Mark said his lips were sealed as well. "Now, let's just hope we never need any of this stuff," Jim exclaimed. "You got that right," Mark agreed. The men went inside and were given the clothing that had been brought for them. Everyone looked at the grain mill. The women were all anxious to try it. Mark wondered how long that would last. Not long. No one was really surprised about the shortage of batteries. Mark gave the shampoo to Sam, and she almost had tears in her eyes as she hugged her father. Soon it was time to eat dinner and listen to the news. The national news was mostly about the progress, or lack thereof, toward getting the power back on. It seemed they were working to get one of the largest transformer manufacturers up and running, and the first transformers they produced would go toward getting other plants working. When it came time to announce the newest cities under federal control, the list was longer than it had previously been, and it contained the city of Houston. That meant the 2 biggest metropolitan areas in Texas were now under martial law. Mark knew San Antonio was the 3rd largest. The biggest local item on the radio was about the water. The newsman reported the big pump the water board had been trying to fix at night for several days was still not working like it should. They had announced they were taking it out of service to get it fixed properly. It was going to be offline for about 3 days. That meant for those 3 days, water would be supplied to the city for only 24 hours a day. Everyone would have pressure from 8 a.m. to noon. Each household was allowed to store 1 gallon of water for each person, plus 5 gallons to use to flush the toilet. The water board assured everyone this was temporary, and as soon as the big pump was repaired, there would be water pressure 24 hours a day. Jess asked what everyone thought the real deal was on the water. Gunny answered the water board was just looking for some way to keep the water flowing in a reduced capacity without coming right out and saying they can't meet demand. That, he estimated, would start rioting like they had in Cincinnati. The other adults concurred. The meeting was fairly short. George reported that they finished 3 cardons today. Chaparro told everyone he had hoped to be finished with the Jeep tonight, but that it was probably going to be closer to lunchtime tomorrow. Ted reported that the barbed wire was all strung on the west side of the gate and the east side was almost halfway finished. Gunny asked the guards who'd been on duty earlier how many groups had come by today. They said there were only 2. One large group of 12 to 15 people on bicycles went by and just waved. A couple on foot had come by, and the man got a little testy with the guards. He was insisting that they be allowed to stay. The guard told him that they had to have a sponsor to move in with, and the woman tried to get the man to leave. He started screaming about it being a free country and demanding they be admitted. When the guards in the foxhole pulled their rifles up, the men decided to leave, but he cursed them for a good half a mile at the top of his lungs, the guard reported. Gunny wanted to meet with the guards again for a few minutes tonight. Ted reminded the education group they were meeting again tonight, and then the meeting adjourned. Mark and Jim went to the guard meeting, and Gunny assigned the shifts for tomorrow. He took all the men to the shed and handed the ammunition each had bought or been given. After they were gone, Mark asked Gunny a question. "What did you teach the guards to do if someone tried to climb the gate?" "Shoot him," the old Marine said without emotion. "Shoot him?" Mark must have looked even more shocked than he felt. "Yes, if someone with a weapon is coming at you, you shoot him, wouldn't you?" "But what if they don't have a weapon?" "Don't matter. If you let them get over the gate and get in a scuffle with them, they might get your weapon. Then you'd be in a real jackpot, Karate Man." "I see what you mean, Gunny, but there has to be a better solution than shooting an unarmed man." "Well, Karate Man, maybe you can train the guards in some of that kung fu shit, and we could incorporate that into our gate training. But I say, a guy who'll climb over a gate when he's got a couple of rifles trained on him has got nothing to lose, and you don't want to get in a fight with a guy who's got nothing to lose." "Well, maybe we can find a solution somewhere in the middle," Marcus suggested. "Maybe so, Karate Man. Maybe so."